The Curious Case of Mr. Hugo's Haunted Wheelchair. Chapter 1. The First Disappearance. I've been a night nurse at Meadowbrook Senior Living for 7 years, and I thought I'd seen everything. Mrs. Patterson's escape attempts via the laundry chute. Mr. Chen's midnight ukulele concerts. The Great Pudding Heist of 2023. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the night Mr. Hugo's wheelchair decided to develop a mind of its own. My name is Claire Hoffmann, and I work the graveyard shift. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Which means I'm intimately acquainted with every creak, groan, and suspicious noise this old building makes. On a typical night, my biggest challenge is staying awake during the 3 a.m. slump. And making sure Mr. Kowalski doesn't reorganize the supply closet again. He claims our system is chaos incarnate, and honestly, he's not wrong. It was a Tuesday when everything started. Tuesdays are usually quiet. The excitement of Monday has worn off. And everyone's still recovering from weekend family visits. I was making my 11 p.m. rounds, checking that everyone was comfortable and that no one had attempted any late-night adventures, when I passed Mr. Hugo's room. Hugo Martinez was one of my favorite residents. A gentle 78-year-old with a crown of white hair and glasses perpetually perched at the end of his nose. He'd been an engineer for some aerospace company, though he was frustratingly vague about the details. Classified, he'd say with a wink whenever I asked. His room was plastered with blueprints, sketches, and what appeared to be extremely complex mathematical equations that made my head hurt just looking at them. That night, Mr. Hugo was fast asleep, snoring softly. His book, Advanced Robotics and You, splayed across his chest. His wheelchair sat in its usual spot beside the bed, the chrome gleaming under the nightlight. I continued my rounds, checked on Mrs. Evans. Dreaming peacefully. Mr. Davidson. Also dreaming, but less peacefully based on the muttering. And made my way back to the nurse's station. That's when I heard it. A soft whirring sound. Mechanical. Purposeful. I looked up from my lukewarm coffee and nearly dropped the mug. Mr. Hugo's wheelchair was rolling past the nurse's station. By itself. No one was in it. No one was pushing it. It just glided down the hallway like it had somewhere important to be. Its wheels turning with steady precision. What the? I jumped up, my chair clattering backward. The wheelchair didn't stop. It turned the corner toward the west wing, with the confidence of someone who'd walked this route 1,000 times. I scrambled after it, my sensible shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Hey, stop. Naturally, the wheelchair did not stop. Why would it? Inanimate objects are notoriously bad at following instructions. I rounded the corner just in time to see the wheelchair approach the emergency exit at the end of the hall. The door, which should have been locked, swung open. The wheelchair rolled through and vanished into the darkness. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the open door and the empty night beyond. The door slowly swung shut with a pneumatic hiss. For a long moment, I just blinked at the space where the wheelchair had been, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Then I did what any reasonable person would do. I went to check if Mr. Hugo was still in his bed, and if I was having some sort of caffeine-induced hallucination. Mr. Hugo was exactly where I'd left him, snoring away peacefully. I checked my coffee. Black, 2 sugars, same as always. Nothing suspicious. I went back to the emergency exit. Locked. The wheelchair was gone. I stood in that hallway for another 10 minutes, wondering if I should file an incident report or check myself into the psychiatric ward. Eventually, I decided on a compromise. I'd wait until morning and see if the wheelchair turned up. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe someone had taken it for a joyride and would return it before dawn. Maybe I needed a vacation. Chapter 2. Panic Stations. The wheelchair did not return before dawn. When I handed off to the day shift, I pulled aside my colleague, Marcus, and told him what happened. Marcus is 6'4", built like a linebacker, and afraid of exactly 2 things: his mother's disapproval and anything remotely supernatural. "So you're telling me," Marcus said slowly, his eyes widening, "that Mr. Hugo's wheelchair just rolled away? By itself?" "Yes." "And went through a locked door?" "The door opened. I don't know how." Marcus made the sign of the cross. "He's not even Catholic." "Claire, that's some paranormal activity nonsense right there." "I know how it sounds. Did you check for strings? Magnets? One of those robot vacuum things?" "Marcus, I know the difference between a wheelchair and a Roomba." He shook his head slowly. "I'm just saying, this place is old. Built in 1952. You know what that means? That it needs better heating? That it's probably built on an ancient burial ground, or the site of a tragic accident or something." He lowered his voice. "You know Mrs. Patterson swears she sees a lady in gray on the 3rd floor. Mrs. Patterson also swears that pigeons are government surveillance drones. Doesn't mean she's wrong about the ghost." I sighed. "Can you just keep an eye out for the wheelchair? And maybe don't tell Mr. Hugo it's missing until we find it?" "Oh, I'm definitely telling everyone," Marcus said cheerfully. "This is the most interesting thing that's happened since the Great Bingo Riot." As it turned out, I didn't need to worry about breaking the news to Mr. Hugo. When he woke up and discovered his wheelchair missing, he was remarkably unconcerned. "Probably just borrowed it," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Someone always needs a wheelchair around here. Mr. Hugo, we have spares. Nobody borrows custom wheelchairs." "Well, I'm sure it'll turn up. Things always do." This attitude struck me as odd, but Mr. Hugo was a laid-back guy. We set him up with a standard-issue wheelchair for the time being, and I went home to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that wheelchair rolling down the hallway, purposeful and silent, like it knew exactly where it was going. Chapter 3. The Return. 2 more nights passed without incident. I started to wonder if I really had imagined the whole thing. Maybe the wheelchair had been stolen. We'd had a few theft issues over the years, though usually it was just family members borrowing small items. Maybe someone's relative needed a wheelchair and had simply taken it. This theory fell apart on Friday night. I was at the nurse's station, catching up on paperwork, and trying to remember if Mr. Davidson's dinner was supposed to be pureed or regular. Note to self: better labeling system needed. When I heard the commotion. "Claire." Marcus's voice echoed down the hallway. "Claire, get out here." I nearly knocked over my coffee. Again. And rushed toward his voice. I found Marcus in the main hallway, along with Janet from the kitchen and two residents, Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Kowalski, who were both supposed to be asleep but clearly weren't. They were all staring at Mr. Hugo's wheelchair, which had returned. The wheelchair sat in the middle of the hallway, perfectly positioned, as if it had never left. Except for one small detail. It was absolutely covered in mud. Dried mud caked the wheels, spattered the frame, and streaked across the seat. Leaves were caught in the spokes. And clutched in the seat, held in place by a mysterious weight, was a piece of paper. It just rolled in through the emergency exit. Marcus whispered, his voice shaking. I watched it happen. The door opened, and it rolled in, and the door closed behind it. I told you, Mrs. Patterson said triumphantly. This place is haunted. I've been saying it for years. The wheelchair is possessed. Janet breathed. Oh my God, it's possessed. Mr. Kowalski was more practical. He leaned forward, squinting at the paper. It seems to be a map of some forest. I stepped forward, my heart hammering, and picked up the paper. It was damp and slightly muddy, but it could be recognized as a ripped-off map. But what was more extraordinary was the display. God knew how LED screen was installed on a wheelchair. There on the display, a series of numbers and symbols that made absolutely no sense were flashing. On and off like it was actually breathing, in glaring red letters. They looked like complex equations or perhaps some form of code. It's a message, Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes wide. From the other side. That's not how ghosts work. Mr. Kowalski objected. Ghosts don't leave mathematical notations. How do you know? Have you been a ghost? Have you? Everyone calm down, I said, though my own hands were shaking. There's got to be a rational explanation. The rational explanation is that we're haunted, Marcus said flatly. We need to call a priest. Or an exorcist. Or the Ghostbusters. The Ghostbusters aren't real, Marcus. Well, neither are ghost wheelchairs, but here we are. I looked at the wheelchair, sitting there innocently despite being covered in mud and mystery. Where had it been for 3 days? What did these symbols mean? And most importantly, how was it moving on its own? We should check the security footage, I said. Already did, Marcus replied. The cameras near the emergency exit went fuzzy right when the wheelchair appeared. Like something was interfering with them. Mr. Patterson nodded knowingly. Electromagnetic disturbances. Classic paranormal activity. Or a technical glitch, I said, though I was starting to feel less certain. I'm calling my priest, Janet announced. Father Mike has experience with this sort of thing. Your priest has experience with haunted wheelchairs? He dealt with Mrs. Evans's apparently possessed toaster last year. That toaster had a short circuit. That's what the demon wanted us to think. This was getting out of hand. I took a deep breath and tried to think like a rational person. Okay, let's all calm down. In the morning, we'll figure this out. Marcus, can you help me clean the wheelchair? Are you insane? I'm not touching that thing. It's a wheelchair, not a possessed doll. Famous last words. Mr. Kowalski muttered. In the end, I cleaned the wheelchair myself, carefully preserving the mysterious paper in a plastic bag. Even more careful cleaning the LED display, which refused to be turned off. All right, I didn't know how to turn it off. The mud was real enough. Dark soil, pine needles, and what looked like clay. Wherever the wheelchair had been, it had traveled through actual terrain, not some ghostly dimension. Unless ghosts used mud. I was getting a headache. Chapter 4. Investigation and Escalation. By morning, word had spread through Meadowbrook like wildfire. The haunted wheelchair was all anyone could talk about. Residents who'd never shown interest in anything beyond their crossword puzzles were suddenly paranormal investigators. Mrs. Evans organized a spiritual protection committee. Mr. Davidson started hanging garlic around his room. Works for vampires, might work for ghost wheelchairs. Our director, Patricia Walsh, was less than amused. Let me get this straight, she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. A wheelchair went missing, returned covered in mud, and now half our residents think we're haunted? That's the situation, yes, I confirmed. And you witnessed this wheelchair moving on its own? I did. Patricia sighed deeply. Claire, you're one of my best nurses. You're sensible. You don't panic. So I'm going to trust that you actually saw something strange. She paused. But we need to find a rational explanation before this gets out of hand. The last thing we need is families pulling their relatives out because they think we're running a haunted nursing home. Too late, Marcus said, poking his head into the office. Channel 7 News just called. They want to do a story on the phantom wheelchair of Meadowbrook. Patricia's expression could have curdled milk. How did the news find out? Mrs. Patterson's grandson works for them. Of course he does. Patricia stood up. All right, here's what we're going to do. Claire, you're going to figure out what actually happened. Talk to Mr. Hugo. Examine that wheelchair. Find me a rational explanation. Marcus, you're going to tell Channel 7 that we have no comment, and that Mrs. Patterson is a delightful woman with a very active imagination. She's not going to like that, Marcus said. I don't care. Go. After Marcus left, Patricia turned to me. Claire, I'm serious. We need answers. Check everything. There has to be a logical explanation. I nodded, though privately I was less certain. I'd seen that wheelchair move. I'd watched it navigate through the building with precision and purpose. And the piece of map as well as those symbols on the LED display. They meant something. I spent the day investigating. First, I thoroughly examined the wheelchair. It was custom-made, that much was obvious. The frame was lighter than standard models, with unusual modifications. Extra circuitry near the wheels. A small panel on the armrest that looked like it concealed some kind of control system. And what appeared to be a GPS unit hidden under the seat. Interesting, isn't it? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Mr. Hugo had wheeled up behind me. In his temporary wheelchair. And was watching me examine his chair with an expression of mild amusement. Mr. Hugo. You startled me. Sorry. I used to sneak up on my colleagues all the time at the lab. Bad habit. He gestured at his wheelchair. Find anything interesting? Your chair has a lot of modifications. Oh, yes. I made some improvements over the years. Engineering is a hard habit to kick, even in retirement. He smiled. Though I seem to have forgotten exactly what I did to it. The memory isn't what it used to be. Mr. Hugo, do you have any idea where your wheelchair went? He frowned thoughtfully. Not a clue. Though I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. He paused. The mud is unusual though, isn't it? I wonder what kind of soil that is. You're very calm about all this. At my age, Claire, very little is genuinely surprising. Besides, it's just a wheelchair. It's not like it hurt anyone. But it moved on its own. Multiple people saw it. Did they? He looked genuinely curious. How fascinating. You know, I did work on autonomous vehicle systems back in the day. Military contracts, mostly. All very hush-hush. He tapped his nose conspiratorially. Maybe I was more successful than I remembered. I stared at him. Mr. Hugo, are you saying you might have programmed your wheelchair to move autonomously? Oh, I don't know. Possibly? I tinker with things when I get bored. But surely I'd remember doing something like that. He shook his head. Then again, I also forgot my daughter's birthday last month, so perhaps not. This was either a breakthrough or a dead end. Mr. Hugo, do you still have any documentation? Manuals, notes, anything about the modifications you made? Oh, I have boxes of papers. Never was good at organizing. My daughter keeps threatening to throw them all out. He brightened. Would you like to see? Chapter 5. Down the Rabbit Hole. Mr. Hugo's room was exactly what you'd expect from a retired engineer, with organizational skills hovering somewhere between creative chaos and active disaster zone. 3 large boxes sat in his closet, stuffed with papers, blueprints, old notebooks, and what appeared to be instruction manuals for devices that probably shouldn't exist. Let's see, Mr. Hugo muttered, rummaging through the first box. Fusion reactor designs, no. Automated pet feeder, no. Ah. Wheelchair modifications. Here we go. He pulled out a thick folder and handed it to me. I opened it carefully. The folder was filled with detailed schematics, circuit diagrams, and pages of notes in Mr. Hugo's surprisingly neat handwriting. As I flipped through, certain phrases jumped out. Autonomous navigation system. Complete. GPS tracking module. Installed. Night patrol mode. Testing. Auto return protocol. 72 hours. My hands started shaking. Mr. Hugo, did you program your wheelchair to patrol at night? Did I? He leaned over to look at the papers. Oh my goodness. Yes, I suppose I did. Why would you program a wheelchair to patrol? Security checks, I imagine. I used to do rounds in the lab every night, checking the equipment. Force of habit. He chuckled. Though I can't imagine why I'd need to do that here. We're a nursing home, not a research facility. I kept reading. The documentation was incredibly detailed. Mr. Hugo had essentially created a self-driving wheelchair capable of navigating terrain, avoiding obstacles, and returning to base after a set period. The mysterious symbols, on the LED display weren't a message from beyond. They were technical specifications. Angular velocity, friction coefficients, distance traveled, total time elapsed, and force calculations. The wheelchair was showing you its trip data, I said slowly. Was it? Clever of me. Mr. Hugo looked genuinely impressed with himself. Mr. Hugo, your wheelchair traveled 47.3 kilometers over 3 days. Did it? Where did it go? That's what I'd like to know. We dug deeper into the documentation and found something labeled patrol routes. According to the notes, Mr. Hugo had programmed several preset routes into the wheelchair, including one labeled Night Survey. Forest Perimeter. There's a forest perimeter route? I asked. Oh, yes. There's a lovely forest preserve about 6 kilometers from here. I used to walk there before the arthritis got bad. He smiled wistfully. Beautiful place. Pine trees, a creek, some trails. Very peaceful. Mr. Hugo, your wheelchair might have gone to the forest preserve. There's a piece of ripped-off forest map stuck on it when the wheelchair found its way back home. Did it? Good for it. Getting out and about, seeing nature. Wheelchairs need enrichment too. I wasn't sure if he was joking or if his memory issues were worse than I'd thought. The wheelchair was following a program you wrote. It activated at night, left the building, traveled to the forest, patrolled the area, and then returned exactly 72 hours later, as programmed. Huh. He processed this. So you're saying I created a haunted wheelchair? You created an autonomous wheelchair. Then forgot you'd done it. Ah. He nodded slowly. That does sound like something I'd do. I once built a self-organizing filing cabinet and then couldn't figure out where it put anything for 6 months. I sat down heavily on his bed, the folder in my lap. This was the answer. There was no ghost, no possession, no paranormal activity. Just an elderly engineer who'd gotten bored and souped up his wheelchair, then completely forgotten about it. Mr. Hugo, we need to tell Patricia. Patricia? Our director. Everyone thinks the building is haunted. Mrs. Patterson wants to bring in a priest. Marcus is having nightmares. We need to explain what actually happened. Oh dear. Mr. Hugo looked genuinely distressed. I've caused quite a fuss, haven't I? A little bit, yes. Will I be in trouble? Looking at his worried face, I couldn't help but smile. I don't think so. But we should probably disable the night patrol mode. Probably for the best. He agreed. Though it was nice knowing my wheelchair was getting some exercise. Chapter 6. The Great Reveal. Gathering everyone for the truth about the wheelchair took some doing. Mrs. Patterson was convinced we were covering up something sinister. Mr. Davidson thought we were all in denial. Janet had already scheduled Father Mike for a blessing, which he'd agreed to, primarily because he liked Janet's cooking. And Marcus was just relieved to hear there was an explanation that didn't involve the supernatural. Patricia stood at the front of the common room, looking like someone who desperately needed a vacation. I stood beside her, holding Mr. Hugo's documentation. Mr. Hugo himself sat in his now very ordinary, deactivated wheelchair, looking slightly embarrassed. Thank you all for coming. Patricia began. I know the past few days have been unusual. But we've discovered what actually happened, and I promise you, it's not supernatural. That's exactly what someone covering up a haunting would say, Mrs. Patterson muttered. Patricia ignored this. Claire, would you like to explain? I took a deep breath and held up the folder. Mr. Hugo's wheelchair wasn't possessed. It was programmed. Mr. Hugo is a retired engineer who modified his wheelchair with autonomous driving capabilities. And then forgot he'd done it. Silence. Then everyone started talking at once. Autonomous? Like those Tesla cars? He programmed it? So there's no ghost? Can he program mine to do that? Patricia raised her hands. Everyone, please. Let Claire finish. I explained the whole thing. The night patrol mode, the GPS tracking, the preset routes, the forest preserve, the technical specifications that everyone had thought were supernatural messages. I showed them the documentation, the circuit diagrams, the programming notes. So the wheelchair, Marcus said slowly, was just doing what it was supposed to do. Exactly. Mr. Hugo programmed it to conduct security patrols. It activated 3 nights ago, completed its patrol route, and returned exactly on schedule. But the doors, Janet objected. The doors opened for it. How do you explain that? Mr. Hugo raised his hand sheepishly. I may have installed an RFID system that interfaces with the building's electronic locks. For convenience. Patricia's eye twitched. You hacked our security system? Hacked is such a harsh word. I prefer creatively integrated. Mr. Hugo, I'm very sorry. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Mrs. Patterson leaned back in her chair, looking distinctly disappointed. So there's no ghost at all? No paranormal activity? No spirit trying to communicate with us from beyond? I'm afraid not, I said. Well, that's anticlimactic. I don't know, Mr. Kowalski said thoughtfully. I think it's pretty impressive. An autonomous wheelchair in a nursing home. That's quite innovative. It did work remarkably well, Mr. Hugo said, brightening. Not a single collision. The obstacle avoidance system performed flawlessly. Patricia massaged her temples. Mr. Hugo, while I appreciate your engineering prowess, you can't program your wheelchair to leave the facility at night. I understand. I've already disabled the patrol mode. He paused. Though if you ever need a self-driving wheelchair for emergencies. No. Absolutely not. Fair enough. The meeting dissolved into chatter as people discussed the revelation. Some were disappointed there was no haunting. Others were impressed by Mr. Hugo's skills. A few wanted to know if he could modify their wheelchairs. Mr. Hugo politely declined, citing Patricia's very firm head shaking. Marcus approached me, looking sheepish. So, I maybe panicked for no reason. You thought we were haunted. That's a reasonable response. I called my mom and asked her to pray for us. That's sweet. She's worried I'm working in a spiritually compromised environment. Well, now you can tell her we're just working in a regular nursing home with one very clever resident. He grinned. Fair enough. Though honestly, part of me is a little disappointed. A haunted wheelchair would have been cool. It would have been terrible for business. Also true. Chapter 7. Epilogue. Life after the haunting. The story of Mr. Hugo's autonomous wheelchair made the rounds, though not quite in the way Channel 7 News had hoped. Instead of a sensational haunting story, they got a human interest piece about an elderly engineer whose brilliance occasionally outpaced his memory. It was actually quite sweet. Mr. Hugo became something of a celebrity around Meadowbrook. Other residents started coming to him with engineering problems. Could he fix Mr. Davidson's TV remote that only worked intermittently? Yes, and he also upgraded it to control the lights. Could he help Mrs. Evans with her tablet that kept freezing? Yes, and he also installed some games for her. Could he explain why Mr. Kowalski's hearing aids kept picking up police scanner frequencies? That one took longer to solve, and the answer involved a nearby radio tower and some unexpected resonance frequencies. Patricia established a new rule. Any modifications to medical equipment had to be approved by the staff first. Mr. Hugo grumbled but complied. He did, however, continue to tinker with non-essential devices, and the nursing home was soon filled with small quality-of-life improvements. Automatic curtain openers, voice-activated lights, and a particularly clever system that reminded people when it was time for medication by playing their favorite songs. Mrs. Patterson remained convinced that the building was haunted by something, wheelchair or otherwise. She reported 3 more sightings of her lady in grey, which were later explained as Mrs. Evans in her robe looking for the bathroom at 2 a.m. A trick of the light, and an actual grey cardigan someone had hung on a coat rack in a darkened hallway. She took these explanations with good humor but maintained her position that we were definitely built on some kind of sacred ground. The wheelchair itself was retired from autonomous service but remained a point of pride for Mr. Hugo. He'd occasionally wheel himself around the building, pointing out where his creation had navigated with particular skill. See that corner? Perfect turning radius. And it avoided the fake plant by at least half a meter. Beautiful programming, if I do say so myself. As for me, I learned several important lessons from the whole affair. 1. Never underestimate the ingenuity of retired engineers. 2. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one, even when the correct explanation involves autonomous wheelchairs programmed to patrol a forest preserve. 3. Nursing homes are never boring. They might be quiet sometimes, but boring? Never. And 4. If you're going to modify your wheelchair into an autonomous vehicle, maybe leave yourself a reminder note. Or at least tell someone before the thing goes wandering off into the night. 3 months after the incident, I was doing my usual rounds when I noticed something odd. Mr. Hugo's room was dark, but there was a soft glow coming from under his door. I knocked quietly. "Come in." Mr. Hugo was at his desk, surrounded by papers and what looked like electronic components. His laptop was open, displaying what appeared to be complex code. "Working late?" I asked. "Oh, you know. Can't sleep sometimes, so I tinker." He gestured at his project. "I've been thinking about that autonomous wheelchair incident. Please tell me you're not building another one." No. Patricia was very clear about that. He smiled mischievously. "But I was thinking. We have a lot of elderly residents here who need help getting around. What if I designed a walker with smart features? Nothing too fancy. Just something that could detect obstacles, prevent falls, maybe alert staff if someone needs help. I looked at the schematics on his screen. They were detailed, thoughtful, and potentially very useful. Have you shown this to Patricia? Not yet. I wanted to get your opinion first. Too ambitious? I thought about it. A smart walker could genuinely help people. And unlike the autonomous wheelchair, it wouldn't go wandering off into the forest at night. I think it's a great idea. But let's present it to Patricia together. And maybe start with a prototype we can test under controlled conditions? Excellent idea. His eyes lit up. I knew there was a reason you're my favorite nurse. I'm everyone's favorite nurse. True, but you're mine especially. As I left his room and continued my rounds, I couldn't help but smile. Yes, Mr. Hugo's autonomous wheelchair had caused chaos. Yes, we'd all thought we were haunted. And yes, Patricia had developed a nervous twitch that appeared whenever anyone mentioned the word modifications. But underneath all the panic and confusion, something wonderful had emerged. A reminder that creativity and brilliance don't retire just because you reach a certain age. Mr. Hugo had built something remarkable, even if he'd forgotten about it. And now, instead of hiding his talents, he was using them to help others. I paused at the nurse's station, looking out over the quiet hallways of Meadowbrook. No ghostly wheelchairs rolled past. No mysterious symbols appeared. Just a peaceful nursing home full of remarkable people, each with their own stories, talents, and occasional tendency to accidentally create paranormal-seeming events. Somewhere in the distance, I heard Mr. Kowalski muttering about the energies in this building, and Mrs. Patterson insisting she'd seen an orb in the dining room. Marcus was probably already planning his response. I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled in for the rest of my shift. Just another normal night at Meadowbrook Senior Living. Though I did make a mental note to check if Mr. Hugo's walker prototype could navigate doors on its own. Patricia would definitely want to know about that in advance. Fool me once, autonomous wheelchair. Fool me twice. Actually, knowing Mr. Hugo, there probably would be a twice. And a 3 times. And honestly, I was kind of looking forward to it. As long as it didn't happen during my shift.